Hi, welcome to Cancer Today's Facebook Live discussion. I'm Marci Landsmann, Senior Editor of Cancer Today, a magazine and website for cancer patients, survivors, and caregivers, published by the American Association for Cancer Research. Each quarter, the editors here highlight a book that we think will resonate with our readers, and then we talk about it in our Facebook group. This winter, our book club pick has been The Neuroscientist Who Lost Her Mind, My Tale of Madness and Recovery by Barbara Lipska. In the memoir, Dr. Lipska shares her experiences with manifestations of mental illness, which are caused by a combination immunotherapy treatment for metastatic brain tumors. Dr. Lipska, who works at the National Institute of Mental Health, has spent her career studying mental illness, but she was incapable of recognizing any trace of it in herself. As some backstory, before our first scheduled interview for Cancer Today, which was many months ago, Dr. Lipska sent me an email. She mentioned she was having brain surgery on the day of our initial scheduled call. She had also fallen and broken several bones in her body. I had assumed Dr. Lipska would want to reschedule for a better time, maybe after surgery or after her bones had been mended, but she asked if we could move the interview up and as quick as possible. That next day on a Saturday, I called Dr. Lipska, who felt talking with me was a good use of her time while in bed recovering from her injuries. Dr. Lipska has a tenacity and a scientist mind that strives to make sense of her surroundings. While some might be embarrassed or hide details of bad behavior that includes some car accidents, paranoia, and even fears of being poisoned, Dr. Lipska recounts what happened to her with little hesitation. All the while, she works to make sense of her experiences in the same way a scientist would dissect tissue samples under a microscope. I want to thank you for joining us today, Dr. Lipska.
Thank you, Marci.
How is your health? How are you doing?
I think I am doing a lot better than during our first interview. My bones healed. I had a brain surgery shortly afterwards, not after our interview, the initial interview. And then radiation, and unfortunately it happened that I had a recurrence. It was found after my brain surgery, and I am again on immunotherapy treatment. Basically the repetition of what I had described in the book.
And I guess you're being closely monitored to make sure those symptoms don't happen again.
Yes, I don't have any side effects. I make sense, I hope. So that's one thing, but I don't even have rashes or other symptoms that I described in the book after the first immunotherapy. Many things happened since then in terms of immunotherapy treatment. The doctors had gained much more experience how to treat patients. I was one of the first patients on immunotherapy with metastases in the brain. So they lowered the doses, and I guess this is why I'm feeling so much better this time.
That's good to hear. That's great. I want to talk a little bit about the book, and I think some of what everything you've written is so brilliant. But so I'd like to read a couple of passages. I want to start with something that really struck me very early in the book, because I think it may get to the heart of some of your motivation for writing the book. But so you write, in this dark hour, the intensive care unit nurse who is monitoring me pulls up a chair next to my bed and sits down. As the snow falls outside the window, words spill out of me. I tell her things I've never shared before, painful stories that I thought I left behind in Poland. I talk all night. The one thing I think in all of your writing and even in our conversations is your ability to sort of keep moving forward and not look back. I was curious, did it surprise you that you would tell this story, it seems like at first to a stranger, then to your family, and then in a book as well?
Okay, so this conversation with the nurse happened after brain surgery. I didn't show any side effects of anything other than I was pharmacologically treated after brain surgery. I was getting high doses of steroids. And I think I became a little manic because of that. So my being so talkative was the reflection of my manic state. But why did I talk about my past? I felt that many things, I was sure I would die probably soon. So I wanted to address things that I never addressed before of my past, that things that I felt guilty about, I didn't feel good about, I didn't talk about it with my children, or because they didn't want to talk about it, about their father who died, it was my husband, and things like that. So there are many reasons why I was so talkative during that night, but it helped. It definitely helped, especially to talk about it with a stranger at the beginning. I think it kind of eased my way to these very difficult conversations with my family.
Yeah. One thing you also write about in the book, which is interesting. So the doctors, you really wanted to get on this immunotherapy treatment trial. This was before the drugs were approved. And you write about how the study doctors reviewed your MRI scan and said there was no new growth, which meant basically you could join the trial. But you had sent your scans to a second doctor, unbeknownst to the trial doctors, and the doctor called you that morning and said, you have really small growths, but you need to get them irradiated before you start the trial. You decided not to tell the clinical trial doctors, and I'm just curious, knowing what you know now, would you still purposely hide that information to get on the trial?
So I might add that the new lesions were in my brain, and it posed a particular danger to if I entered the trial, immunotherapy with these untreated lesions. But I decided to do it, and I knew that if we keep doing this, I will have probably another lesion, and I will have to wait a few weeks before again entering the trial. Then I would have them radiated, and the process will repeat itself. It will never end. And I knew this is a death sentence. I knew that the lesions or the cells, which become later bigger and seen on the MRI scan as the lesions, will grow. So I didn't want to die. Basically, I thought if I die, I will die trying something that offers help, that is immunotherapy. And yes, I would do it again. Absolutely. Actually, my doctor here from immunotherapy trial agrees with me. He didn't know it because no one knew it before, that I shouldn't be radiated actually. Because radiation plus immunotherapy would cause a lot of inflammation and problems that I face later. So it is better to actually enter clinical immunotherapy without radiation, but it was a trial, so it was a requirement for me entering it. I didn't feel great about I didn't lie, but I didn't say the truth, and it was not my place there to decide, do I have lesions in the brain or not. So I just kept silent and decided to do it. It was not an easy decision at all. I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell my children. It was just me deciding about my life. And it was a good decision.
After you finish the last infusion for your immunotherapy treatment and the doctors realize that your brain is inflamed and you need to go off that clinical trial, and that was the cause of sort of the issues you were having with the mental illness and the paranoia, you don't really see what all the fuss is about. You're sort of incapable at that point to really objectively look at the situation. And you say that it's likely because of the war that's going on in your brain caused by your treatment. When looking back, do you think that a level of denial can be healthy and even necessary for a patient undergoing treatment?
I'm not sure that this is the right word, denial. I was detached from reality because of the inflamed tumors in my brain or inflamed melanoma cells in my brain due to immunotherapy. And I read a lot of publications before and knew and remembered, strangely, I remembered, even in this detached from reality state, that it can happen, that the lesions will get inflamed because they are responsive to immunotherapy, and then they will fade away. And this is exactly what happened. Not that I was so smart, I just happened to be right. I was lucky. I was incredibly lucky. So, I had the courage, I think, to face something that the doctors didn't know very much about yet, and I didn't know very much about. But as an independent and strong person, I thought, I will tell them that I'm not going to give up yet, which I did, unfortunately. So
Well,
being strong definitely helps. I think being strong, but being in denial of reality, I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure that I was in denial. I was absolutely sure that I am right.
That's a great response. And you're still here, so yeah. And you wrote a book to tell it.
I'm lucky. I'm not that smart. I'm just very lucky.
There's one thing, and I constantly was thinking about your family during all of this, and when I was reading the book, I mean, and when the doctors, I'm sorry, early in the book, you described a trip to Hawaii as you hope for the possibility of going on the immunotherapy trials. This was like after you found out that you had a metastases in your brain from melanoma. You think about joys, you think about your family, and you write, every night in Hawaii, all 5 of us stretch out on the tropical lawn in front of our bungalow, hold hands, and stare for hours into the enormous, glittering sky. I don't want to die. I lift my foot to touch a star with my big toe, and then another star, and make wish after wish. Soon 5 pairs of feet are dancing across the stars, skipping over the vastness from which we came and to which we'll return. We are together now, tight as can be. Which is brilliant. I'm wondering, going through that and hearing the power of that, what role has your family played in your getting to this place and even back then?
Enormous, in one word, enormous, critical, absolutely critical. I'm very close with my family. We share almost all our pleasures with them, biking and running and other sport competitions and leisure, as you noticed. So they were around me because they, as I didn't know how long I will last, they wanted to spend as much time with me as possible. So my kids were there, and my sister and her husband, my brother-in-law, and we did 200 miles biking before that evening that you described. We did 200 miles biking on the volcano in Hawaii on the Big Island. It was incredible. I remember it to this day.
What role does your family play what advice would you give to people who are sort of in similar situations, perhaps in the caregiving role, taking care of somebody like
go to Hawaii and bike 200 miles? That would be a lot too much. But, surround yourself with people, not necessarily family, but people who you trust and who love you and who care about you. It is a real serious battle. You cannot go to this battle and win it alone. It would be way too much. So my husband is my supporter because we live together. The kids are adults. They live somewhere else, but he sees me every single day and cares for me every single day. I try to care for him too. if he needs it. But family is absolutely, or someone who is close, maybe friends, it may be doctors who you like. But being alone in this would be terrible, terrible. I wouldn't probably survive it.
Mm-hmm. And you are such an independent person. Do you think that's difficult for your family to sort of give you that independence and also kind of know when to step back?
Very difficult. Because I fight all the time and they want to limit my independence. And I know I cannot do certain things anymore, like biking. I lost balance and vision. My optic nerve has been damaged because of radiation and after effects of treatment. So I should not be so independent all the time, but it gives me freedom. Freedom is something that we all strive to achieve. So, but they worry about me. If I go outside, I always use an app which allows to trace me, to track me during my even walks in the neighborhood. So it is not an easy thing for them. Or for me.
Yeah. I'm curious too about the physical structure. Does what happen in the structure of your brain from this experience, along with all the manifestations of mental illness, does it give you more or less hope for interventions that might provide relief to those who suffer from mental illness, like such as Alzheimer's or your area, which I believe is schizophrenia? Do you have more or less hope that there might be something that potentially could alter that structure to bring people back after, or at least make the symptoms less?
Make medications which are effective, because the medication we have for mental illness, including Alzheimer's, which is considered neurological illness, but I don't really see much difference, are not really working very well. They are alleviating some of the symptoms, but they are not curative. I have huge hope that we'll discover something which is akin to immunotherapy in cancer research. And I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't immunotherapy also. There's a lot of evidence, recent evidence, that all these mental illnesses may be due to some kind of problems, functional problems in our immune system. Mm-hmm. So the breakthrough that happened in cancer research, I hope will happen in mental illness and in many other branches of medicine. So yeah, it gives me hope rather than discourages.
I'd like to read more from your book, if that's okay with you. One thing you write about, which I sort of think talks a lot about some of the things you're dealing with right now. You write, "I continue to worry about my mind. My brain will never be as it once was before. It has been injured by tumors, shot through with radiation, assaulted with drugs. It is scarred, figuratively and literally. And since my brain is different, I am not exactly the same person that I was before the illness. But strangely, I feel completely myself." One of the things that has been circulating on Facebook, and there's actually just been a study on the word survivor, and some people don't identify with the word survivor and others do. You look up the word survivor, also in the book on Google, and you note that it means a person who remains alive, carries on despite hardship or trauma, perseveres, and remains functional or usable. And then in the book, you question whether you and other survivors you are about to meet are functional and usable. I'm curious what you think. Do you think survivor is an adequate word to describe you and others who have gone through or are going through treatment?
Well, of course, as you read, it depends on the definition. If you mean survivor, if you mean that survivor is the person who was before the illness, survived the illness and came back to exactly the same point in life, of course it is not true. I'm not the same person as I was. I lost I lost balance. I lost vision. I lost orientation a little bit. I'm not that strong anymore, and I don't engage in all these sports and other activities that I did before. And I aged. That's additional. It has nothing to do with the illness. But I still consider myself a survivor. According to that definition that you read, I'm functional. I swim. I do shopping. I go outside. I go to work every single day, and I'm professionally still active. So I'm not the same, but I'm still functional, and I'm still useful, I hope, to society and to my family.
Great. I'm going to take some questions that were submitted prior to our discussion, and one of them was about your treatment, which was targeted radiation and CyberKnife. And I guess the person who wrote the question just wanted to know what that was like to undergo that treatment.
So targeted radiation, as well as CyberKnife, includes some putting a mask, a plastic mask on the face. Some people respond to it very strongly, or negatively, I mean. It feels constricting. It feels it feels very weird. So in terms of physical feeling, that's the only feeling that is different. You lie on the table and have this mask, sometimes very, very tight, like extremely tight. But I don't respond to it negatively at all. I consider it a meditation state. If I can put myself in this state, I can lie without any movement. That's another thing. You cannot move for hours. The longest stereotactic radiation lasted 2 hours without any break. And I was lying incredibly still because I meditated. I wrote in the book that I even wrote poems, or put together poems in my mind. In other words, I didn't feel any radiation, of course, passing through my brain. You cannot feel it, but that mask is pretty tight.
And was CyberKnife similar or different?
CyberKnife is easier. It takes shorter time. And the difference is that it's in real life guided. These X-rays are guided by the computer. And the mask is not that tight, which is considered by some not to be that sensitive in terms of localization. In Boston, they don't have CyberKnife. They're using SRS, and considering it a better solution. I don't know. I don't know which one is better. I'm not an expert in this. But the feeling is very similar. You lie in the dark room, and the best way is to either fall asleep, which I'm not falling asleep usually very easily, but meditate or compose poems.
Or maybe write your next book.
Yeah.
There's another question someone had submitted in advance about your memories. The book it sort of follows 2 months, right, of treatment, and what happened over those 2 months, which it feels like longer because so much happened in that time. But when people describe what happened to you, do you remember it? Wait, let me read this again. When people describe them to you, do you remember what happened, or is it that people are telling you what happened?
My people surrounding me, my family, my friends, whatever, and my colleagues at work. At first, I didn't remember much. My memories were gone completely. I didn't even realize that I was ill, that I was not there mentally. So I prodded them to remind me. And once they reminded an event, I remembered it. So these memories were encoded in my brain, but I didn't have access to them, I think. So when they said, you remember you were walking on the street, we were walking to CVS, I said, oh yes, now I remember. And the smells come back and the scenes come back. I did have these memories in my brain. I couldn't access them. So it was, we worked on this together. I interviewed them, my co-writer interviewed my family and my doctors, my co-workers also, so that we have the best picture of how I behaved. And based on this whole picture, we wrote what it is.
Gotcha. Another person had asked a question about what has been most difficult about your treatment.
Well, without any doubt, it was that I lost my mind, and I behaved so badly towards people whom I love most: my husband, my children, my grandsons. I hurt them, not knowing about it, not realizing what I was doing, and I'm terrified that it can happen again. This is a terror that I have, that I'm living through every single day. Every day I think, what will happen if I lose my mind again? Pretty horrible.
And then an ordinary lapse, perhaps in your memory, you might think, is this the start of something?
Well, it did happen several times. My people from my family, when I'm stressed out or start not yelling, but be a little bit louder, they worry that, oh, something is happening with you, something is happening with you. And then I have to prove to them that I'm okay, that I can count, that I can logically think, that I see things as they are, but sometimes it wasn't that easy. It's not funny at all, actually. It's pretty terrifying.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How to prove that you are sane is not easy, really, unless you take it for granted that it will never happen to you, to me again, or to you at all. But it may happen, and you wouldn't probably recognize it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to add that you think would be important for keeping in mind of our readers are often are affected by cancer, either survivors, patients, and caregivers? Is there anything I haven't asked you that you'd like to talk about?
I think the most important message is that don't be ashamed that you're ill. Don't hide it. Hiding it and not talking about it is really difficult to the patient, but also inhibits you from getting help, from seeking advice from other people, because you just limit the number of people that might know something and might advise something. See that doctor or this center or this team. So I have no inhibition about talking about my illness, either mental illness that I went through or cancer. But all these two diseases are particular taboos. Probably mental illness more so in nowadays, but cancer was not that long ago also the big C that no one talked about. Talk about it. The more people know about it, the better chance that you will find someone who has some kind of treatment that you haven't heard about.
That makes sense. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. We actually did get a comment from Facebook that I just want to share with you. It says, I was struck by the many parallels of my experience with brain trauma. due to arteriovenous malformation. I too experienced problems with visual field deficit, balance, and depth perception, all of which still persist today, along with some of the other symptoms that you described. It is so interesting to me that through the cause of the assault to the brain, though the cause of the assault to the brain is different, so many of the manifestations are the same. Thank you for being so transparent and sharing your experiences, thoughts, and fears.
Thank you so much. I'm very sorry that the person is suffering from this illness or what happened. It very much depends which brain regions were affected, and this causes the similarity between my case and their case. I don't have depth perception, which is a huge problem because my optic nerve was damaged due to radiation. And I have problems with balance. I have some problems with memory now. I see that I'm not as quick as I was before. So all these things are somewhat incapacitating the person, but let's, try to live. And brain has enormous plasticity. Maybe with time, I'm hoping that I'll overcome these problems. And I wish the reader who asked this question the same.
Thank you. Great. Okay, well, I think that ends our discussion. I want to thank you so much for spending time talking with us today, and I thoroughly enjoyed your book. It's enriched me, so thank you for writing it.
Thank you so much, Marci. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.